more than almost 75% of economic activity operates under the shadow, is basically part of the informal sector, informal economy.
Yeah.
20, only 27% of the workforce can be labeled as the formal workforce, who have a central agreement, who form within the bracket of formality,
Yes.
who are taxed and so on and so forth. And informality has huge, like high levels of informality, has very bad or aggressive repercussions for the economy. Because the government is not able to tax enough, generate enough revenue. It robs them of what their fiscal capacity could have been. Secondly, it also hampers the productivity of formal firms. According to certain research papers, on average, the productivity of a formal firm is impeded by 25% because a similar operational firm operates in the informal sector. So that is two. And thirdly, in terms of financial inclusion, obviously there's a lot of activities is cash-based in Pakistan due to the virtue of it being informal. They try to hide their earnings, they try to kind of play with their books, etc. What has the financial sector done, or what can it do to incentivize those people, those firms operating under the shadow to formalize, or at least save their earnings with formal institutions? Are there have this been thought of, or have any interventions been done to specifically target that segment?
Yeah. So you see, the issue is that we have to figure out what are the real reasons behind this large currency in circulation, or the shadow economy that you just referred to. And the primary reason, to my mind, are the taxation system. And the taxation system, the piece of the banking industry comes much later. But if you have certain structural gaps in there, then those gaps have to be plugged in before we can actually talk about what the financial sector can do to then do their job better. So, for example, in case of Pakistan, and I'm going to quote you a number and statistics that probably will be surprising for you. I've recently done an article on currency in circulation, by the way. I don't know if you came across myself, Salim Raza Saab and Sultan Lana Saab. That article, when we were doing it, the statistics came in front of me, and it was actually quite alarming. So 3 sectors which contribute more than 50% in our GDP, which is real estate, and I know you've talked about a lot of that one, on agriculture, and the third one is retail. They all put together cumulatively are over 50% of our GDP. And their contribution in the deposits is how much, Noresh? It's merely 15%, the 3 of them put together. And this is where, it hurts. So that's why I said it is fascinating statistics. I just came across this recently, and I thought today when we talk about it, I'm going to quote this one. And this is a very important number. So when you have such large portion of the GDP out of the tax net, then the informality has to come into the economy, and that results into lower financial inclusion, that results into lower investment, and of course the lower.
Yeah.
And that also, by the way, you've rightly pointed out, puts the burden of taxation on those people who are part of the system. So remaining 50% is actually taking the brunt of the remaining 50% which is not there. And this is something which is very concerning. And that has to be plugged in first. These are not difficult things to tackle. For example, on agriculture side, the taxation is already there, and it's pretty judicious actually. But we have given it to the wrong agency to collect the tax. If you just assign the right people, either the Provincial Revenue Authority or the Federal Revenue Authority to collect it, then I think there is a major contribution that come through there. I'm going to quote another number to you, which is again something that will surprise you. And then, you know, on the real estate side, you have multiple level of issues there from income. By the way, I'm not a big supporter of income tax. I believe that there has to be turnover tax like UK. And so turnover tax on real estate income that is coming in, and then revenue coming in, and then you have the the transfer fee involved in there. You need to review that as well. But then the pricing on which the transactions have to take place, those are completely distorted too. Those are determined by the government, by the district administration in each district. And the result is that those numbers are so low that overall tax, even if you collect on the transfer fee, that's not adequate enough to justify for that sector the kind of income that is out there. And that leads into that larger informality, because major saving portion of Pakistan's household goes into the real estate. So typically, if you ask any of your colleagues in Pakistan or a family, most of them have their savings in the real estate. But that's not part and parcel of the overall scheme of things. Retail, on the other hand, is not taxed at all. And retail alone, by the way, contributes around 21% of the GDP. And retail also have other implications. For example, in retail, most of your foreign currency demands come from the retail side. So the large grocery stores in Lahore, Karachi, and elsewhere, the imported goods which are there, they're not imported through the banks. They generally come through through informal means, and that is in fact black means, and that results into this sector being completely out of the thing, and results into a negative contribution to the economy, because that the single biggest contributor to inflation is the foreign exchange piece, which will always remain under pressure, because there is a pressure coming in from the sector which is totally out of the tax net or documentation right now. On the sales side also, the majority of them are cash sales. So we need to put some kind of check in there. Now, these three sectors alone, Norris, our estimate is that on a very conservative side, we can collect somewhere close to 3 trillion rupees. And just to put things in context for your audience, the total tax collection this year in Pakistan will be 9.4 trillion. So almost more than 35, one third of that could come from these three sectors, which are not part of the system as we speak. PBA has done some assessment, and they've come out with 1.8 billion number without agriculture. But I would say that our assessment says it has to be 3 trillion rupees.
So, okay, for my personal knowledge as well, I have a lot that I can learn from you. So whenever we are working on informality, whenever I'm working for informality, we make a set of we create a policy package, and it's a very diverse set where we talk about easing the process of registration. We talk about strengthening enforcement. We talk about setting up one-stop shops, digitizing so it's easier, more conducive for firms to set up and to, alleviate the challenges that they face. Another thing that constitutes part of that policy package is giving or according those micro firms, small or medium firms, access to finance. That falls within incentivization. So if they have more incentive, if they have access to credit, then they're more likely to formalize or register themselves rather than operate informally. But then it poses a chicken and egg situation. It's more risky as well. If a firm granting access to a firm, an informal firm, there's this likelihood that they might not return the credit, that they might default. So is that a good solution, granting access to finance to those particular firms? Has that been done? Has that been tried and tested in Pakistan?
Yes, that is a good solution, and that has been tried and tested also. By the way, the ease of doing business piece, or as you mentioned, is an incentive for people, is not adequate enough to attract people from informal sector. Unless you have carrot and stick approach, on the taxation piece on these three big credit, all things will come subsequently, subsequent to that one. So you really need the stick and the carrot. Carrot there too. For example, you need to incentivize people that look, if you in retail sector, just to quote one example, if you were to make the payment through the POS machine, then the general sales tax will be lower in comparison to cash, for example. And then you have to have the stick too to make sure that has been enforced as well. So having said that, those things actually follow once that piece is taken care of. And again, on the ease of doing business too, we are not something to write home about. 108th in, I think, 180 countries that World Bank assessed. And then, I was looking at this Freedom Foundation's work on, freedom of economic freedom, index on economic freedom for the businesses. And they've constituted 4 broader constituencies and then sub-constituency 3 in each, so 12 of them. And they scale country on a scale of 1 to 100. Pakistan has been rated as 49.2. And in terms of total number of countries, again, 180. Pakistan is 152nd. So the reason why I'm quoting these numbers to you, that, what kind of incentive would be required to bring them into the system will be very difficult unless everything move in tandem or in the right direction. So specifically answering your question about the microfinance and SME. So one of the tragedy that Pakistan has faced, Norez, is the fact that, we have over a period of time has kind of completely diminished these specialized institutions. And now Pakistan has become more of a universal banking type structure. And the result is that those specific businesses, whether it's microfinance or SME or agriculture, we have not been able to contribute much to these sectors. And the critical mass of the financial inclusion that you earlier talked about, or the informality of the economy, or the overall credit uptake which is not taking place, is in these particular sectors. And that has banks are not equipped to undertake that business, and those specialized institutions have disappeared. Blended risk financing is recently been, I am the one who introduced that company to Pakistan, by the way. It's called Infrazam in Pakistan, which is done with the Private Infrastructure Development Group of UK. That is the one step in the right direction. But all of that has to lead towards financial inclusion in a big way, and bringing that formality into the system, but slowly and gradually, unless you plug in those other weaknesses. I would like to also share with you that, in the previous government, the government had launched a program called Kamyab Pakistan program. I don't know if you're familiar with that. I happen to be the I happen to be the convener of that program. So I devised that program from scratch to launching that program. And that was mainly focused towards, entirely focused towards getting the funding. So repository of funding are the commercial banks, and the lenders are the microfinance institutions. So you would give the funding to the microfinance institutions. You have government as an intermediary in the middle, and then microfinance institutions will then go out and give the credit to the most deserving sectors in the society, which was low-cost housing, agriculture, and SME. Well, not SME, but S. So that program, in which the government actually gave first loss risk to the banks, and they also gave the subsidy on the funding side, because high interest rate does not allow people to do the service properly, or the credit offtake for that matter. And therefore, it was important to make sure that those subsidies are available. Unfortunately, because of the fiscal constraints that we are facing, for example, this year alone, our funding requirement from the industry, banking industry, is around 5.5 trillion rupees. So there is a gap between the, between the revenue and the expenses to that extent that you hardly can divert funding for these kind of sectors to support initiatives which are important to bring them into the formal system. The other thing is also, Naresh, that it's not as simple that you will just give them credit incentive and they'll come into the system. It is their dealing subsequently with the others as well. So the counterparty, if they are not part of the formal economy, then you will have another problem at hand, because you don't have the clout enough to ask them to be part and parcel of the whole thing. And there will always be a distortion as far as your numbers are concerned and your dealings are concerned. And then it will be somewhere a hybrid of the two. And you end up falling for informal side more than the formal side. So it's an overall complication that needs to be addressed.
No, absolutely. I think you've rightly pointed this out.